Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Your host is Deborah Rue, CEO of Rue Global Impact, and co-founder and chairwoman of Billion Strong, an identity and empowerment organization designed to bring billions of voices of persons with disabilities together. To join the global community and to donate to the cause, visit billion-strong.org. That's billion-strong.org. And now, on to the episode.
Hello, and welcome to Human Potential at Work. I am LaMondre Pough, and I'm filling in for Deborah Rue. I am the CEO of Billion Strong, and I know you've heard Deborah talk about Billion Strong quite often, and I've actually been a guest on the show a few times, but today I am filling in. And we live in a time of immense change. You've heard that the only constant is change in the universe. We are really living that out every day now. And sometimes people really struggle with change when it happens. And we lose sight and we lose focus, and we get in situations where it really seems like life has changed forever and we're not sure of how we're going to deal with it. Today, our guest, who's an author and also a speaker, is going to help give us some perspective on what happens or how to best deal with change. He is an amazing guest who has an amazing story. And as I said, he is an author, and the title of his book is Sentenced to Blindness. Now what? So please welcome Morten Bonde to Human Potential at Work. Morten, welcome.
Thank you very much, LaMondre. I'm happy to be here.
And listen, we're excited to have you with us today. Amazing book title. I can't wait for us to really get into the discussion about why you titled the book the way that you did. But before we get into that, give us a little bit about your background. Tell us who you are.
My name is Morten Bonde, and you pronounced it very well. I'm from Denmark, and I have a background in communication advertising. For 12 years, I've been working with the Lego Group as a senior art director. And I have two sons, 16 and 18, and a lovely wife, and two small Cocker Spaniels. So everything's fine there.
Well, God bless you with the two teenagers.
yeah, they're really good boys. I couldn't be more proud. So we are really having a wonderful time together, and it's actually great to see them grow up. And then we're actually hanging out like friends more than I'm the dad yelling and doing all that. So that's amazing. I'm really grateful.
That is amazing.
So the story, and you mentioned the book, and Sentenced to Blindness was a title that I came up with because when I was 29 years, I'm 48 today, back in 2002, I was diagnosed with a genetic eye disorder called retinitis pigmentosa. And it's a disease that slowly turns off the cells in the retina one by one. So it's a slowly graduating journey towards blindness. And when I got that sentence, I call it felt like a sentence that sometimes, I was just told sometimes in the future, at one point in the future, you will probably end up being blind. Okay, thank you for that information. And I'll just, head on.
And what's interesting about that, typically when people hear about disabilities, particularly those that are progressive, many times it does feel like a sentence. And honestly, many people treat you as if you have gotten a sentence. I have spinal muscular atrophy, which is a progressive neurological disorder. And as my disability progressed, people would see me and they would see the way that my disability progressed. And they would be like, oh, poor kid. I remember when I first went from walking to a manual wheelchair, and people would see me and they would say things like, oh my God, his muscles are wasting away. He can't even walk no more. And my thinking would be, whoa, I've got wheels. I can actually move and not get tired. And so it's definitely a matter of perspective and what it is. So tell me what sentenced to blindness now, but what is that about?
It was actually a part of a project because in 2016, after have been an art director working with visual communication for almost 15 years, I started really experiencing, you know, problems in my everyday life because I was acting as if there was nothing wrong with my eyes. So I didn't really pay attention to my my health, my how I was coping with losing my sight. So in 16, I simply crashed and burned with stress and depression, and I didn't even have any clue about what that was about until my wife said, "How is it with your eyes, Morten?" Because I hadn't really been at the ophthalmologist for almost 7 years. And then we went to the ophthalmologist. "You are legally blind. Did you know?" And I said, "No, I didn't actually know that." And then it started, dawning on me that there's something that I really not paid attention to myself and noticed how my state was. And so I just started looking at myself and I said, okay, can I somehow change the way that I look, upon the fact that I'm going to lose my eyesight? If I can't change that, can I somehow change my perspective on it? It's like you said, and I think you had, if you can talk about an advantage in this situation, but you actually maybe started early on having that mindset. But I was an adult, so I had to teach myself to not getting caught up in what I was thinking about situations, but more, okay, how is it I want to think about the situation? So the book, the subtitle is called A Journey from Hopelessness Street to Possibility Road. The poster is there behind me.
I love that, by the way. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I did that myself because I normally have a little tooth, but I can try to see if I can simulate. But imagine that you can almost like, this is how I see. So I scan the surroundings and then I stitch the whole thing together in my mind so I can still see with my central vision.
And I want to give a audible description of what you just did. So what Morten did was he put his hand up to the camera and created a small circle. And through that small circle, it gave a very narrowed and tight view of the much bigger picture. And he was saying that this is how he sees the world physically. This is how he sees the world. And off right above his left shoulder is a beautiful poster, and it has the title of the book on it. It's really beautiful and stunning. It's shadowed. There's some hints of blue and some hints of white behind it. But it really is a beautiful visual description of what he just demonstrated there. And I just wanted to be clear that so that everyone could get a sense of the movements.
Yeah, of course. So the book is it was my diary on a journey from hopelessness street to possibility road. So I gave myself some challenges, and one of them was to become a public speaker, but also to feel comfortable talking about this, feel comfortable about being a person with a visual disability. And so there was a journey, and now it's almost 4 years, 3-4 years ago, I published the Danish version. And I've been giving a lot of talks and, been talking about this. How can we change our perspective on our challenges? And it's not just only for people with blindness, it is for everyone, especially in the time that we are in now. How can we not fix what is going on outside of us, but maybe have another approach to it, teach ourselves to see it from a different perspective, so we don't create enemies that we can't do anything about.
Right. What's interesting about the way that you just told your story of your experience with not seeing an ophthalmologist in 7 years, and when you went there, he told you that you were legally blind, and you did not perceive that yourself. You did not perceive the fact that, oh, I'm legally blind, that someone had to tell you that. So often we find ourselves in those situations where, for whatever reason, we end up in a place like the ophthalmologist office, and then they label what the condition is that you didn't realize that you had until that label was placed on it. And then all of a sudden, when the label is created, then all that comes with that label enters your life. Not saying you were not affected by the condition before, but now the label of being legally blind brought a whole new perspective. Not just your perspective, but the perspective of others now that you carry that label. Can you explore that just a little bit more?
Yeah, and it is very important insight actually, because what happened was that I was at a very low point in my life, so I didn't really have a lot of energy and strength to go up against this. So when people told me that I was, legally blind, I felt like I was legally blind, and I started also talking inside my head. It's not when I say it like this, people say, "Oh, that sounds mad or crazy." But I noticed that we all have, and I always had a dialogue going on inside my head, and I didn't know that it for the greater part was always negative about the situation. So I came to a point. There was actually the one point in the winter, at December of 16, when I was sitting at the local job center talking about retirement plans, and I was just broken. I couldn't deal with anything, and I had this strange moment when I felt that at this point it doesn't really matter if I live or die. I don't care. And when I had that feeling, it was a strange moment when I felt that all the identities that is me. I was senior art director, I was dad, I was drawing my sons to karate lessons and to skating talk. That was me. And then in 1 second, I experienced everything just fell off. Like I was just stripped of identities. And it was just such a liberation. I felt so free. And then I started looking at myself and I said, okay, if I think that I am the sum of all my experiences, then I have, I haven't understood anything. So I said to myself, okay, what is it that I am? And then I started from there, and I started researching history, religion, philosophy, psychology, everything I can get my hand on to figure out what can I actually become if I start all over from scratch. So I started learning new things, and I started adapting a new mindset, and meditation and mindfulness was definitely a huge part of that journey.
I love that question. What can I become if I start all the way over from scratch? That is a great question to ask, because for me, I've been doing that work as well, really deconstructing belief systems, whether they be negative or positive, just things that I have believed about myself and about my experience just as a person. And it really has repositioned my perspective on the world. And now in the title of your book, you talk about going from hopelessness from hopelessness street to, and say the rest of it.
Road. Right. Hopelessness street to possibility road. Yeah.
To possibility road. Take me to the hopeless. Take me to that hopeless street. What was your hopeless street, and what was at its core?
Well, I think that was when I realized that I was consumed by darkness over the fact that I was going to lose my eyesight. I was always keeping it at a distance. Instead of relating to it, looking it into the eye and say, okay, here you are, blindness. You and I, we're going to figure this out together. I just kept it out of my sight until a pile of whatever it was I was pushing in front of me, I couldn't do it any longer. So I realized that I'm actually walking on hopelessness street now. There's nothing for me to do here. If I continue on this path, I'll just go further down hopelessness street. And then I said, okay, is there a possibility? Is there a way to just take one step to the right? Because there is possibility road. It's always just next to each other. Because you can end up on hopelessness street in a second. And then you have the power of choice to say, no, I want to be on possibility road. There's just a little screw in your head that makes that transition from one street to the other. So for me, it was a very visual way for me to understand, when am I on hopelessness street? And actually, when I'm on hopelessness street, I can actually feel gratitude, because now I know that there is also a possibility road. So without the other, you can't really appreciate. So if you don't have the dark side, you can't appreciate the brightness. So it was that's the deeper meaning behind that subtitle.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. Two things that came to mind as you were saying that. Number one, hopelessness or the trip to hopelessness road is a short drive. It's
Yeah.
a very short drive to get there. But having that, being there and being able to be thankful, I often say that gratitude is the narrative of hope. And what I mean by that is even in situations where things seem hopeless, when I develop a sense of thankfulness, when I develop a sense of gratitude, it informs my perspective. And in informing that perspective, it gives me hope. It gives me fuel for a brighter outcome, a brighter tomorrow, about possibility. How did you make that transition from hopelessness road to possibility, to hopelessness road to a possibility row? How did that transition happen for you?
That was a journey. I think it started when I got really interested in mindfulness behavior, mindfulness meditation, and meditation. Because what I realized was that this narrative that we have, this thinking machine that we have, that it's always on, and it seems to be like a disease for the modern civilization. Everyone constantly thinking, thinking, thinking. So what I started doing was practicing, becoming very still in my mind, because then I could slowly start to observe what it was that I was thinking all the time. So becoming a quiet observer of all the things that I was telling myself all the time was the beginning of this. Because then I had a choice. I realized I have a choice to decide how I want to react or respond to what I am experiencing right now. So if someone says something to me that should upset me, I can say, right now I'm just going into myself, feel my body, feel my breath, feel my legs standing firmly on the ground. And then I can see in myself that the impulse was to go at it.
Yeah.
How dare you? Why can you? All that. Then I just create this little space, and then I say, no, I'm not going to do that. Maybe I could perceive this as hostile, but I will see it instead of, someone who's having a bad day or someone who is having a hard time. I transform that into love. So I say, no, there's something. Can I do something for you right now? I don't need to say it. I just act it. And then I see often that conflicts that just dissolve into thin air. So having that mindset and being awake all the time and noticing how my thoughts are interpreting things, that was the beginning.
Yeah. And that gives you a position of power. That gives you a true position of power, because then you're not just mechanically reacting to a situation, but I have a choice. I have a choice, and choice equals possibility. The possibility equals power, at least in my head. That's the way that it works. So I think that is a beautiful progression and journey that you experienced. And as I said in the intro about this constant state of change that we're in, and honestly, within the past 3 years, it has been accelerated and it is extremely swift. Change comes extremely swift now. How do we change our perspective as it relates to problems and situations? How do we make that shift? Because that's so much of what this conversation is about.
Yeah, and that also comes back to observing. So the way that I look at challenges now and problems, very quickly I make a little bit of a shift in the way that I look at problems. I see, okay, this is something that I didn't plan. No, one, I can argue with it. I can be against it. I can judge it. I can do all those things. But it doesn't really make sense because it's here. It's now. It's what it is. So what I do now is that I quickly come to terms with it. I accept that this is what is now. I say yes to whatever comes. I accept it as if I have chosen it myself. Because then there's only how to get further from here. I just accept that this is what is. And then I decide to go into that and say, okay, I would like to change this. And there's something there I can change. Okay, let's live with that. Let's accept that. So always being, discernment here is really the key word. Noticing with yourself, can you say yes to whatever comes to you in this moment and then go from there? Because you don't have to accept everything that's coming in, but you have to say, yes, this is what it is now. And then I think that's the most important thing. And I think if everyone could do that, we wouldn't see all the things that we are seeing now, especially in the Eastern Europe, the countries there and all that. That's just my philosophy and something that I live.
No, listen, I agree with that. I think life is about facing it. It's about facing it, not necessarily accepting, but about facing it. Because if I can face it head on, then I will be able to identify what are the things that I can change, what are the things that I really have no control in whatsoever, and how do I live at peace in all of it? Because it goes back to that whole serenity prayer thing. God, give me the serenity to accept the things that I can't change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference between the two. And I guess at the end of that, and good wine to help me deal with all of that. But I think that it's important. It's important that we realize that we're not talking about a lay down philosophy and just take whatever comes. But what we are talking about is facing whatever comes. And what's interesting about this is so often when we hear that kind of talk, we think that means not being afraid or not having doubt. But it doesn't mean that at all. In fact, it means recognizing those fears, those doubts, those apprehension, but then analyzing them and being intentional about the next steps, about how do I move forward in this. But the role and the goal is always to move forward. And I think it's important that we talk a bit about mindfulness and meditation. At the beginning of this year, and the end of the year is always a really reflective time for me. And I do a lot of analyzing where I am and core beliefs and all of those kinds of things. And this year, at the beginning of the year, I didn't make any resolutions. I rarely ever make any resolutions in terms of the new year. But this year I made a decision, and it was a real decision. And this was after I evaluated my core beliefs, after I evaluated what's important to me, I made the decision to intentionally operate from a place of love. And let me just explain that just a little bit. I'm not talking about the feeling of love. I'm not talking about the endorphin producing, ooh, that makes me feel so good love. I'm not even talking about the words of love, even though those are important, but it is the intention of love. It is the action of love. And I really, even though I'd done that all before, I never made an intentional effort to do that. Morten, when I did that, it changed everything. It changed the way that I work. It changed the way that I see relationships in terms of my friends and family. But this was the most important thing that it has done for me thus far. It has changed the way that I treat and I interact with myself. It has changed my concept of what self-love is. And honestly, I believe it's made me better in terms of how I love others now. And that was a very intentional thing. And so I want to hear about your journey with mindfulness and meditation. First of all, explain to us what that is.
Yeah, I just want to say what you just said there is actually what I meant when I said, instead of going into an argument, very deeply, I can feel love for the person that I'm standing in front of. And exactly how you explained it, not in a love that you experience with your wife or your spouse, but something very much deeper. And it's somewhat the same. It's very ancient, actually. It's very ancient. That feeling is something that has been described through the ages, all religions, and it's not something we just made up today. So it's very important to notice. Mindfulness is about paying attention on purpose in the present moment without labeling or judging anything. So if you can cultivate a behavior where you can actually be with your sensations, with your breath, with where you are in space right now, and then relate to what is happening outside you, what is coming in, then you have a much greater success in not going with the autopilot. The programs that you have that are through upbringing, culture, and all different parameters. But you can stop for a second and create a little bit of space between what is coming in and what is how you respond to it. Mindfulness is very ancient. It stems from the Buddhist traditions, and it is about cultivating that ability to be with whatever comes without labeling it or judging it. And that's that was something I started doing. I didn't understand it at first. It has become a gimmick, sort of a corporate thing. Every corporation have programs, but they often, when you go to a mindfulness class, it's often about for 20 minutes, you sit there on your mat and you practice, but it is about doing it all the time. You have to take that experience that you practice with you into your everyday and be aware and be conscious. And that's mindfulness. And meditation is more the ability to, for me, it's more the ability to be focused. So instead of having a ton of ideas all the time bombarding you and you're going with like a hose, like a fire hose, it's about being more intentional and focused on doing one thing. So if I set a goal for myself, I practice that goal in meditation. I see it and I imagine it. I create the feeling that I want to feel when I somehow get to the end goal. So meditation is more a discipline in being focused and staying with whatever it is that you decide to stay with and not getting distracted all the time.
You know, and I believe, particularly in a world where there's so much information coming at us so quickly, and as I said before, things happen very swiftly in this new world, and what was yesterday may not necessarily be the very next moment. It is difficult for people to get grounded and focused enough to actually effectively meditate, or honestly to even be mindful, because one of the things about mindfulness is about focus, is about concentration, is about awareness. And it's tough to be aware when things are swirling around you and so many things are vying for your attention, so many things that clad themselves in the clothing of priority. This has got to be important to you. You have got to pay attention to me because I am important for you. This is how everything presents itself now. What are some of the tools and what are some of the ways to help introduce us to mindfulness and to meditation in a world when you're being bombarded and pulled in a million different directions every second?
Yeah, it's actually something I started working on myself. I'm working on a book number 2. It's going to be more of an audio book. But I'm right now creating a series of guided meditations, and you can actually find them on my YouTube page already. A guided way for you to be in your own space for 15 minutes up to 30 minutes, maybe even 45 minutes. And that's very difficult to do if it's the first time that you're sitting down, closing your eyes. It will only take 10 seconds and then your brain is exploding because you're sitting here. Well, I don't want to do this. You have 10 voices in your head saying, this is stupid. No, I'm so busy. I want to do something else. I'm bored and all that. And then the guided version helping you overcome that, the impulse to get up and say, no, this is silly. I want to do something else. I don't have the time. But what is actually very important to acknowledge is that research has shown that your ability to stay focused, your ability to sleep, your ability to communicate, your psychologically stamina, all these areas in your brain is getting enhanced by practicing mindfulness. So I'm self-taught. People think, no, did you go to school? You don't need to. You don't need to.
Did you hang out with some monks?
I read a ton of books. I listened to a ton of audiobooks and I studied ancient philosophy and I said, everyone can do it. Today, there is a whole, library that goes thousands of years back in time that you can just go in and tap into. You don't need necessarily to. I don't say you don't go to the schools, but I decided I want to be my own teacher in this, and I just picked and chose and experienced on myself. So now I'm there where I want to try this out. So it's going to be an audiobook with it. It's going to guide you. I think the subtitle, again, it's going to be something about, I'm going to help you now to go from hopelessness tree to possibility road. So there are a lot of opportunities on YouTube where you can just type in mindfulness guided meditation, and a lot of them will appear, and are really actually very good.
Yeah. And I think that's wonderful. I can't wait for your guided meditation to come out, because I think it'll be very empowering and very freeing for a lot of people. I love something that you said earlier when you were talking about the book in itself and the principles that you teach. In the book, you said, this is not just for people who are experiencing blindness or people with disabilities, but this is for everyone. So often we have a tendency, particularly when the guide is a person with a disability, to try to silo them off to an area, or try to silo us off into an area where it's just about people with disabilities, when this is really about the human experience.
Yeah.
And finding the right guide for you just as an individual. And I believe that it's important that when we present whatever insights, whatever wisdom, whatever experiences that we've had, that we label them as human experiences and not disability experiences, nothing that precludes other people for it. Because the truth is, the lessons, even though they may have come through the experience of disability, these are lessons about how I can be a better me, period. Yeah. And I love the fact that even though the title of the book is Sentenced to Blindness, the now what is the important part. Because your sentence might not be, and I'm using that word because that's what you used, your sentence might not be disability. Your sentence could have been poverty. Your sentence could have been low self-esteem derived from absent parents, or whatever sentence it was, whatever the sentence is, whatever the condition is, the end question is still the same. Now what?
Yeah.
And what that does is it opens the door for countless applications. And I think that's a very powerful thing. But what it also does, it shows that you, Morten, had to become vulnerable enough to share the fact that I had real issues with this, or I have issues with this, and I'm still working through them.
Yeah.
It gives a sense of that. It gives a sense that I have not arrived, but I am willing to share the journey with you. Where does that come from? Where does that willingness? Because you could have done this on your own without incorporating anyone else, but you chose to speak out about this. Where did that come from?
It came from the realization, and that was part of the research, that if you want to change behavior, habits, you have to repeat new behavior again and again until it gets learned and it becomes, second nature. I gave a little bit of a competitive person. So I said, okay, I'm going to give you a challenge, Morten. In 4 months, you have to go on this journey. I gave myself 4 challenges in 4 months that should, teach me to change the way that my autopilot just automatically reacted. And one of the first challenge was actually, I call it my 30 days stop, swap, thought month. So for one
Wait a minute,
entire
say that
month,
again. Say that again.
Stop, swap, thought, swap, thought.
That is
so
great.
Every time you're saying, this is very tangible, this is a tool. So every time you find yourself in a situation where you say, God, whoa, stop, swap, thought. That's mindfulness. Now I notice I'm complaining about something. Can I do something about it? No. Okay, stop, swap, thought, change perspective, relate to it in another way, put yourself over here and see it from a different angle. And I said, you have to do that more for 1 entire month. And what was most important was that every time that I noticed that I was not doing it, when I was complaining, I was driving until 16, and I couldn't drive any longer. So I had to, go to work by bus, and the trip that took half an hour now took 1.5 hours. And I was standing there every morning in the rain, complaining. And then I had to, stop, swap thought. And then within 5 seconds, I had to change to a positive perspective. And then I realized that, the boss that I hated was actually, 1.5 hour times 2, where I could listen to audiobooks. I could sit at the back seat in my huge limousine. I didn't have to drive myself, And I started realizing, it's so interesting. I get to decide whether something is good or something is bad. It's just something that happens in my head. So I realized that if I have to do this, I really have to do it. And making it a public matter was a way for me to do it. Because I wrote a mail to my boss in July, and I said, hello, Ulrik. In 4 months, I would like to give a talk at the Lego about how I decided to become a person who can see possibilities instead of limitation. Sent. I said, oh no,
I did it.
no, I didn't. Yes, yeah. So I had to do it. So I said, okay, I'm gonna go all the way with this. And I decided, and then I started playing around with manifesting. It's such a woo-woo word. Sometimes people say, manifesting, what's that? But I really said, okay, is there a way for me to imagine something so vividly that I can almost smell it, taste it, and feel it, how it would be when I get it. I read a lot of books about that, and a lot of people say, it doesn't work. But I said, I want to do it 100%. And I saw again and again, the way that I was elected to do a TEDx talk here in Denmark was that a project. I said, I'm not going to stop thinking about this for 3 months. And I thought about it, and I imagined it. And after 3 months, I was contacted, and they said, do you want to give a TEDx talk here in Denmark? And I said, it took 3 months to call. Sure, I want to do it. So it's just, it had to become something that I had to involve people in before I made the efforts, focused my attention on it only, like literally only.
And I think that's a very powerful story in terms of, especially with the TEDx talk about it. I am also a person who believes in manifestation, but I think a lot of times when people hear that, they think, yeah, just wish it and it'll happen.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that either.
Nope.
In fact, in order to really manifest, and I'm just talking about from my personal experience, it does become a thing where you focus on it. It becomes a part of every breath that you take. And what ends up happening in that situation is that you'll begin to respond, act, and move that way. And once you begin to respond, act, and move that way, the universe rises to that challenge. Oh, that's what you want? Then let's go for it. Now, here's the thing. It may not manifest in the way or in the time that you believe or that you think it should, but just know that it will. And I've seen that time and time again. One of the biggest examples of that, I had a podcast called 5P with LaMondre. And when I started that podcast, it was all about the SDGs and making those a reality. And when I started that, the first thing I said, and this was in September of, I can't remember exactly what year it was. I said, in a year, I want to speak before the UN because I just felt like that was important. I wanted the perspective heard. I had no idea how that would happen. I didn't know I even had connections to make that kind of thing happen. But nonetheless, I went about doing the show. And I focused every show on the SDGs and stories about that and how it could manifest. In a year, in September of the following year of stopping that, I got an invitation to facilitate a panel on intersectionality with the ILO, which is the UN. And it was like, whoa, wait a minute. How did that happen? No connections. And that is one of just a vivid example of manifestation. And I believe that this has been your journey, and this is the journey that you're on. What's next for you, Morten? What are the things? I know you talked about working on your guided affirmation or your guided meditation series, but what else is there for you?
It's a good question. Right now, I'm actually, in the state between things. I think I'm gonna dedicate my time on, using this ability that I have. Changing something that is a disadvantage, not being able to see, can that somehow become my superpower? Can that enhance my perspective? Can it enhance my life? And what I want to do, what I want to dedicate myself to is to, show people that we have far greater influence on our happiness than we think. We have a tendency to think that this happens to me and happens to me. We decide for ourselves how we take in things that happens to us, mold them, and make it into our advantage. So I'm gonna do much more, I think, in consulting, I think, in helping people to get to the realization that we have this power within us. It's not, people look at me and say, Morten, what you have done, I can't do. And then I say, okay, well, there you have the answer. If that's your approach to it, then you're right. You're absolutely right. But some people say, I want to do the same as you have done. I think I can do it. Then you will do it. It's Henry Ford said that whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right. So there you have it. So yeah. I think it's going to be more into that, definitely.
Gotcha. Well, I tell you, man, I wish you much success. I think that you are a tremendous light with a tremendous story and a tremendous gift to share with the world. And we at Human Potential at Work will support that with every ounce of what we have. So thank you. Thank you. How can people get in contact with you?
I have a website called mortenbonde.dk. That's my Danish site, but it will put you into the English part of the page. But in Facebook and LinkedIn and all the platforms, they can find me. But mortenbonde.dk is probably the first place to go.
And you spell Bonde, Bonde, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Fantastic.
And the book is on Amazon, and I actually narrated it myself, so it's also there as an audio book. So Amazon is also a place to go. Just type in "Sentenced to Blindness." Now what?
Absolutely, absolutely. The book is "Sentenced to Blindness." Now what? Morten, thank you for sharing this time with us at Human Potential at Work. And as I said, we will support you in any way that we can, because we believe in doing light work. And what I mean by that is LIGHT work. And you, my friend, are a light. And so thank you so much.
Thank you
for your time.
And you too, LaMondre. You too.
Thank you, sir. So this has been Human Potential at Work. I am LaMondre Pough, filling in for Deborah Rue. And we want to share some love and some light and some prayers with the Rue family as they are experiencing some times right now. So just keep them in your thoughts and your prayers. And again, send love and light their way. Until next time, we'll see you on Human Potential at Work. Thank you.
You've been listening to Human Potential at Work. To learn more about Rue Global Impact, visit rueglobal.com. And to learn more about Billion Strong, an identity and empowerment organization designed to bring the billions of voices of persons with disabilities together, you can join the global community and donate at billion-strong.org. That's billion-strong.org.